Welcome to another episode of Horns and Fight Songs. I'm your host, as always, Wes, on Twitter at Painted Bronco. Joining me once again is my buddy from back from vacation after a couple weeks, Mike. How was the vacay and the time off in between episodes here?
It was good. Saw a lot of cool places, saw a lot of four different ballparks. Realized I never want to drive in New York City ever again, but it was still fun. Watch Yankees the Red Sox at Yankee Stadium. One of the highlights, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a lot of different historical sites. So it was good and great to spend time with my parents
Oh, there you go.
in that road trip.
Doing fun stuff. We are 67 days away from puck drop on the regular season, so not much longer to wait. But getting into that, let's break down our next schedule. We have the reigning, defending, undisputed champions of the NCAA, the Denver Pioneers, is who we're going to be looking at tonight.
Thanks, Paul Heyman.
You know, if it didn't sound so damn good, nobody would say it. So,
Yep.
um, I mean, and that's exactly what they are. They're the reigning, defending champions. They earned that title this last year. And played extremely well the entire year. It's not really a surprise that they were there. I think really the team that had the best chance at beating them was probably Minnesota Duluth. And
I
it was kind of one bad bounce that put Denver on top in that game.
I think so too. But they just proved within the last 5 years, Denver has been right there, and they've always had a chance to win the national title. This is their second one in 5 or 6 years. I think 6 years now. The last couple of years have gotten away from me, but they did win in Chicago when they beat UMD, and then they beat Mankato this year. But they've been a solid team all around. So it never surprised me that they were there. I really hate them winning.
Yeah, it's their second as an NCHC school, and I believe tying Michigan at 9 overall for most
Yes, they
college
did. They
championships.
did tie.
So a perennial team that's always in the conversation. We're gonna break down their schedule. Hopefully they won't repeat. I would like to see someone else win it. Hopefully another NCHC school, but it's a tough task when you're asking it to play against it when you're playing against a team who has played so well at home in the last few years. Last year they were 17-1-1 at home on home ice.
That and we've talked about this before. They didn't lose until January or February at home when UMD beat them.
Yeah, they had
It's unbelievable
they had a
what they were able to do.
tie with Alaska Fairbanks on January 1st, and they did not lose on home ice until February 12th against Minnesota Duluth.
That's unbelievable how they were able to do that.
And really,
Um,
they'll have a strong home ice advantage this year as well. They only play one non-conference opponent as the away team, and that will be we'll get to that one when we start breaking down their schedule. But really, a lot of their games are at home, and they don't play. I mean, they play 3 out of their 4 main non-conference series at home, 4 out of 5 overall as the home team. So definitely stacking that advantage that they have playing in at a mile high.
yeah, they're definitely the scheduling they worked it in their favor, which as an AD, that's what you want is to have your non-conference at home. Next year might be different, but that's going to help them get into the swing of things for sure.
Oh, 100%. They will open the schedule or the season with an exhibition game against UNLV, who they have played a couple times, I believe. Um, and we're seeing that rule that was implemented during COVID, where D1 teams can schedule U.S. opponents and other NCAA opponents for their exhibition games, because it used to be a lot of either college schools that were coming down or discrepancies between the teams. Like maybe it was a D2 school that they were playing in their exhibition type thing or things like that. So,
And I think it is cool seeing a school like UNLV playing these. Yeah, they're a club team, but it's a step in the right direction to getting a full Division 1 program. So I think it's cool for the kids that are playing UNLV, and it's also a good warm up for Denver to get their season started and figure out what they have as far as new guys coming in, and how they mesh with the returning players.
So yeah, they start the weekend actually a week late because of their exhibition game. Everyone else is starting regular season play on October 1st. They're one of the few teams starting just exhibition play and then going to uh, actually hosting an icebreaker tournament. So they have a little bit of a weird start to their schedule. They will open their. I don't know if you really want to call it a tournament. They're co-hosting with Air Force, but they're not playing in true tournament fashion. It's more of what we kind of saw with the GLI last year, where two teams will play one night, or all four teams will play both nights. They're just switching opponents, and the hosts won't play each other.
Yeah, it's a round robin of sorts, but not a true round robin.
Yeah.
Uh,
They'll start that against Notre Dame, a team who went 12 or 28-12 last year. Decent record. They played in the Big Ten. They actually took all four games from Michigan last year. The first two were overtime wins in Ann Arbor, but they closed out their season against Michigan with two regulation wins on home ice. Made it to the NCAA tournament, eliminated North Dakota in the first round. So it's a team with a lot of talent. Returning players, a team that you can't just necessarily walk on or walk over. And I think it's a really good team to start the season against and kind of judge where this new Denver team is at with its new players too.
that's exactly what I was going to go for. That's a really good game to start because Notre Dame, they put out solid teams. They're only 3 or 4, I want to say 4 years removed from being in the national championship game against UMD at the XL Energy Center. Uh, so it's a solid program, and it's a good test for Denver to gauge where they're at. Yeah, you have the warm up game and the exhibition, but then immediately they're getting right into it instead of playing uh, like we see in football, kind of the powder puffs to start the year. They're just going for it right away in the first game of the year.
Yeah, and I don't know that it really gets any easier in their next game. They're playing Maine, who did kind of struggle last year. They were 7-22-4. Last time they played, Denver swept, but that was back in 2007. Last year they did have a couple wins over some top 15 ranked teams. I mean, it's a toss up as to how good they can be. They play that weird kind of Hockey East schedule.
Hmm.
More often than not, I believe they're in the Hockey East.
They are in the Hockey East.
Not a team that we see a lot of, so it'll be an interesting measuring stick once again for both Maine and Denver, and
And
how well you can prepare for two different opponents in a weekend like that.
looking at their record from last year, obviously it's not good. 7 wins. Uh, but Maine is a program that does have history and has history of being a very good hockey school. You look at some of the guys that have come out of there to go in the NHL. Their their record might not show it, but they're a proud group, and they play in a tough conference. Hockey East is no slouch of a conference. You have BC, BU, Lowell, um, a lot of very good teams that are in that conference. They just don't quite they didn't quite have it last year. So I think Denver can't go into that game looking at last year's record and saying, we're the national champions. We can walk over these guys. They only won 7 games. I do think Denver. I would say they're probably 1-1 to start the year because I think Notre Dame can get them, but then I think they beat Maine maybe 3-1, 4-1, 4-2, somewhere in there. It's a couple goal game, but it's still going to be a competitive game for them.
I mean, it's definitely plausible. I would say that the tougher of the two games is going to be Notre Dame. Both teams have all off season to prepare for each other. That's that first game's usually a really solid matchup. I've seen Notre Dame a few times. I'm not sure if I've seen them when they were last at Western, but I mean they're always a pretty solid team and a team that competes and gets guys to the next level. So it'll be an interesting matchup for them. Their one away series in non-conference play is UMass, who they did play in 2020. UMass is the back-to-back Hockey East tournament champions. They finished second behind Northeastern and the play of Levi there, and lost to Minnesota in the NCAA tournament. So another tournament team coming in, another tough matchup. Denver did win the last series, but I don't know how much stock you want to put into last series considering the turnover in college hockey from year to year. Yes, it's, I guess, good to know how they matched up the last series, but sometimes those series are 15, 20 years apart, and they're not really going to tell you much.
Yeah, and that's looking at they lost. UMass lost in overtime to a good Minnesota team that was in the Frozen Four last year. So that's and they're now 2 years removed from the national championship team. So there's still guys that are probably on that team. Maybe it's 3. I don't know. But I don't know what happened to the last 2 years. They're just kind of gone. But there are probably guys on that team that were sophomores or freshmen on the national championship team that are now juniors and seniors, and that experience helps them a lot. So Denver didn't their scheduling, they definitely did not do themselves any favors as far as getting wins, but the quality of who they're playing is really good, and that's what you want. Who cares? Tournament time is when it matters. Who cares what your regular season wins and losses were? And UMass, like I said, 22-13-2,
Yep.
And they play a tough schedule too. They started off the year last year with Mankato, lost both of those games, but they're not gonna roll over for anybody either.
No, I think this is definitely one of the more difficult schedules we've seen so far of the teams we've looked at in the NCHC for sure. And it's kind of nice to see a team that won it all last year's schedule make their schedule just as difficult so that they're keeping up and not letting the success get to the younger players and making sure that they realize that they have to play tough every single year if they want to build on the legacy they've started.
Yeah, if you want that national championship that these guys have, we have to play these tough teams. You have to prove yourself and beat the teams that kind of toss up games. Beat the teams you're supposed to beat and win the games that maybe you're not supposed to win.
Steal a series here and there.
Mm-hmm.
They play after that. They're back home and they welcome in Providence, another team that's been in conversations for national titles the last few years. Another currently ranked or was ranked at the end of the year. Yeah, they were 20th. They went 22-14-2, so another really strong record last year. They actually won their last meeting against Denver in I don't remember when that was, and they were a participant in the 2021 icebreaker at Minnesota Duluth last season. So,
and that was a tough tournament. You had Michigan, right, UMD, Mankato, and then Providence. And yeah, Providence, they lost both of their games to Mankato and UMD. But again, another hockey. Denver went heavy Hockey East this year. They have their non-conference is a lot of Hockey East schools. Yeah, Providence won a national championship not that long ago either, and they're a strong. They're a program that you don't hear a whole lot about, but when it comes to tournament time, they're always they're kind of in the mix right there. They might win if they get in, they might win their first round, maybe the second round, get to the Frozen Four. But they're not a bottom feeder by any means. They're kind of a middle of the pack team that can surprise some people. And they did lose in the Hockey East tournament to UMass, after winning their first matchup against Vermont. But if you're going to lose to anybody, UMass is kind of the one team right now coming out of Hockey East that's proving to be the power. Especially after Cale McCarr went through, he really turned that program around.
Yeah, Hockey East right now is being dominated between UMass and Northeastern behind the play of their goalie, who we'll get to at a later schedule when we break down our final schedule, which will be Western. We'll talk a little bit more about that goaltender. And they open NCHC play on the road in Ohio, in the southwestern corner of Ohio in Oxford, playing Miami. They kind of dominated Miami last year, and I don't really know that anyone didn't dominate Miami last year. They struggled really bad.
We didn't. We didn't dominate Miami.
So you'd be the one team.
Yeah, we were the one team.
Denver swept all 4 games. I mean, depending on how you word it, as far as OT games go, Miami did force OT in 1 game, but we're unable to come out with more than 1 point in that entire series. Not as big of losses as they took to St. Cloud, but it was kind of what you expect. You win the games you're supposed to win. These were games that Denver was supposed to win. I don't see it really being any different this year. Yes, there's a little bit more experience for Miami, but they've struggled the last few years, and hopefully this is a year they can get a little bit better, but I don't know that Denver's going to be the team that they get better on.
I don't think so either. I think if there's a team that they're going to get better with, it's going to be Colorado College in Omaha. I think this is a good way for Denver to open up the conference schedule. Yeah, you still have to compete because they can surprise people. It's on the road, but you're not after playing their non-conference schedule to start with. It's a little bit more of an easier series for them and a good way to integrate the younger guys into the NCHC and just kind of get their feet wet in how the conference plays, especially with who they have coming up next. Which thankfully for those guys, they're back at home, but the first weekend in November, they play St. Cloud, and that's going to be kind of the wake-up call because they might come out of that Miami series. This ain't that bad. It's it was tough, but and then they get St. Cloud, and it's like, hey guys, welcome to the actual conference now.
Yeah, I mean, and they're gonna get St. Cloud might have a little bit of a boost there. They're gonna have a goaltender who's familiar with Denver, coming from Colorado College and playing Denver at least 4 times. Every year he's been there. I'm not sure how long Bassey has been. I think this will be his. I want to say he was a junior this year, or this will be his junior year.
He's been there at least a couple years.
He's either a sophomore or a junior, potentially a senior. I don't remember, but either way, he's familiar. He's played Denver a lot. That's one of those series that the NCHC honors as a rivalry series and keeps together throughout the years. They're one of the team that Denver doesn't rotate out. So him coming in, playing for St. Cloud, we saw that St. Cloud was a team that could put up points in bunches last year. We talked about that Miami team struggling last year. They struggled mightily against St. Cloud. St. Cloud outscored them, I think, 19-1 in the one series. So 2 high-powered offense, but Denver's able to stick right there and punch with the best of them. They can answer goals right back and score at will too. And it'll be interesting to see how those two match up, but it's gonna be a close one. And, and the thing is, like, it being on home ice, like, I lean Denver, but St. Cloud's a team that could potentially keep them from building up the way they did last year on home ice.
And I do think that Bassey coming in, having played in Colorado, only an hour away from Denver, he's used to playing in that atmosphere and those arenas and those conditions. And I think that's going to be a big help to St. Cloud going to Denver, that they have a goalie that understands this. Now, the players might not, um, the freshmen that are coming in, they might not understand, but they have an experienced team still, a very talented team, and a goalie who has played in those conditions in the Mile High City, that he can handle what's going to be thrown at him, and he's been a very solid goalie throughout his career. So I think it's going to be a really fun series to watch those scores. I don't know if I don't know if I'll be watching, because I'll probably be watching UMD maybe later in the evening because it is in Denver. But anybody who's has the NCHC TV package for everything, that is a series to watch, because those are two really, really good teams that are going to be duking it out early in the conference schedule.
Yeah, Denver seems to have like their schedule's pretty good. Um, I mean, it's hard to say. It's front loaded a little bit more, I would say, than the back end. Just because of their tough non-conference schedule, and they're starting out their conference play against the top teams from last year, aside from Miami. And then because the next weekend they go to North Dakota, and North Dakota is a tough place to play in, no matter who you are. I think they only played one series last year, and it was in North Dakota, which North Dakota won. And that ended up being kind of a big series when you're in a race for a Penrose Cup. These are the two teams that shared the regular season title last year. So any game between these two has big implications, even though it's at the beginning of the year. The saying is you can't win a championship early in the season, but you can darn sure lose one. So these are important games, even in November.
And we've hammered home this point constantly, talking with Trevor, talking about all these schedules. Grand Forks, that is their pro team. That is the only show that they have going on there, because it's about 5 hours to the Twin Cities, and that's the nearest pro team. They This is what they have. So when you have an arena like Ralph Engelstead and they're all riled up, it is not easy to win at all. So going from St. Cloud at home and having your fans, but then to Grand Forks and Engelstead Arena and their fans, uh, those two back to back are not easy. If they can get a split, I think they're sitting really, really well out of that.
Yeah.
Even just an overtime loss, because I don't care how good your team is. North Dakota, if you can win there, good job.
Yeah, the one thing, and I don't even really know if this is one thing that you can say might be the weakness at North Dakota, might be their goaltender. Yes, it's a fifth year. I believe he's a fifth-year senior transfer student like they had last year, who came from, I think, Bemidji last year and ended up playing
Mm-hmm.
very well for North Dakota. They're kind of in a similar situation. They have the former goalie from Michigan State. Michigan State struggled last year, whereas I think Bemidji played a little bit better the year before the goalie transferred out.
Yeah, they were in the NCAA tournament, and three they lost to, I think they lost to St. Cloud in the regional finals, because we had three out of the four Frozen Four teams, and the only reason we didn't have four out of the four is because St. Cloud had to play Bemidji,
Yeah,
and it was like, well, dang it, why can't we just have an all Minnesota Frozen Four? Then I don't care who wins.
because nobody wants that. But yeah, so they're kind of using the transfer portal to fill gaps, getting another experienced goaltender. I just don't know if he's going to be as experienced as the previous goaltender. Like if he'll work out as well as the previous goaltender who they did that with. But
And
North Dakota finds talent, and they reload as well as anybody.
and the difference too is the league and the teams that he played against,
Yeah,
coming from Michigan State. Yeah, it's the Big Ten, but they're not a superpower. Yeah, you had Michigan and you had Minnesota, who was a very good team last year. But with the Midgie, they're non-conference. They're playing Mankato. They're playing UMD. They're playing these NCHC schools because it's the state of Minnesota. So it's an easy travel thing, or travel weekends, or you can do a home and home with these teams. So there's definitely that difference in the level of hockey that they've played against.
We have a
And I'm not trying to take away from the Big Ten, but it's
all
just
right.
not the same
No,
as
they're a
the,
different
the
conference.
NCHC or
Yeah.
Mankato.
We do have a question from Big Ben in the chat, and his question is: has the transfer portal been as wild for hockey as it has been for football and basketball? Uh, yes and no. I mean, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
depends on the school. I think the one thing that we were also looking at is the number of teams that had to fold and then are rebuilding. There's been a lot of teams that are moving up to the Division One level. There's been a lot of movement in college hockey. Um, so it's but there has been a lot of movement within the portal too. Also, the usage of COVID years have been kind of there's a lot going on to really understand the full impact of the transfer portal at this point, even in when you're looking at just a single conference. So I mean, it's kind of hard to tell exactly how wild it's been, but there's been a lot of movement.
Well, and it kind of depends on the school because you with Western, your your goalie's just up and left.
Yeah,
They went in the transfer portal, so that part's kind of wild. But we see teams like North Dakota, like St. Cloud is doing now with Rennick leaving. They're using that transfer portal to fill needs that they have when they don't feel that the guys they're bringing in are going to be quite ready or not. So there is a lot of movement, but sometimes it doesn't seem it's not like football or basketball where it's more of a shock when guys move. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense why they weren't getting the time. Good for them. They're going to transfer to American International. They're going to Merrimack. They're a team that they're going to actually going to be able to play and contribute towards versus riding the pine and being the grocery stick on a UMD or a Western or
yeah.
North Dakota.
But I mean, like I said, I think there's 2 more years of the COVID stuff too, and that's kind of put a hitch in. It's forced a few more players into the transfer portal. Um, and the other thing with the transfer portal that I might be more similar to basketball than football is just the number of spots available per team. Football has there's upwards of like 100 dudes on a football team. There's space. There's a little bit more space for players coming in and out of the portal. Yeah, they're not all going to be starters, but there's only what is it 30 kids I think per hockey team. Not all of them are skating, but I think that's kind of where the max on the roster is as far as
Yeah,
position and
I
like
don't and I
practice
don't know
games
the
and stuff.
exact number, but you can roster. I think it's 22. It's 20 or 22.
Yeah,
Um,
for per game.
for yeah per game, and then you have your healthy scratches that are doing press box hat tricks and eating 3 hot dogs.
Or
Which, that doesn't sound like a bad life to me.
or
I'm
the
not gonna lie.
or the red shirt kids who probably aren't going to play a lot this year, but um, yeah. So I mean, there's X amount of people in the transfer portal. There might be like 300 kids in that transfer portal. There's only 64 Division One teams, and most of those slots are filled out. So you're not pulling all 300 of those kids onto teams. Maybe you're looking for one or two spots. Um, even
And it's a risk joining going into the transfer portal because you have to be good enough for a team to want you. And if you enter that and nobody picks you up, then you kind of just shot yourself in the foot and you have no place to play.
yeah. But again, the nice thing about hockey is there are kind of a lot of leagues that you could potentially fall into, um, and maybe if there's a team that's willing to take a chance on you, you might sign a junior contract somewhere and end up playing juniors, or fall into an ECHL deal or something like that too. So I mean, there's definitely routes
Mm-hmm.
that lead out, but yeah, it's interesting to still see. And like we kind of saw with Western, there was a lot of people who left because we had such a large group stay back. And kids are promised spots or promised ice times, and you have a kid who's played 4 years and knows the system and ends up being the country's leading goal scorer. Like, you're really going to tell that guy, no, don't come back, and or we're going to bench you for a young player who hasn't really learned the system quite yet? I mean, it's another situation that's interesting. But I think as we get more used to the transfer portal, we'll kind of see it, what it does and how it works. I know they're trying to make changes to it once again with unlimited transfers, which gets into a point where that's just kind of like squirrely and interesting in itself to see that much movement. But yeah, it's had an effect for sure, positive and negative.
And like you said, with the COVID years, that's going to take a little bit of time uh, to run through how things are, and get those kids out, because it is difficult for new guys coming in. Well, shoot, I was promised this spot, but now this guy, he's got an extra year, and I'm happy that they did it, but it just kind of screwed everything up for the next couple years.
Yeah.
Get back to normal.
But the thing too is, like, hockey's this sport where guys can leave school and go right to pro hockey in the middle of the season. We saw it with was it LaFontaine, the goalie from Minnesota,
Yeah, he just
Carolina
up and
got Carolina pulled him out of school to sign a deal, and then I think dropped him at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So he left literally in the middle of the season, like over Christmas break. I think played one game and then said, "Nope, I'm out. I'm going to the NHL boys. Have fun." And I mean, Minnesota played well and recovered well. They made it to the,
yeah, they played very well, but yeah, he did what I'm gonna do if I win the Mega Millions tonight. Just peace.
So
I'm gone.
So hockey in itself is an interesting sport. There, a guy could be playing well, a team has a need, and they decide to reach out and pluck him. Or the number of juniors that sign pro deals creates a little bit of space. So,
and I do think it helps though too, that in hockey, which is different than the other sports, is the number of schools that are now fielding Division I programs, where we're expanding, all these other sports aren't. So, and we'll get to a school here in just a minute that it's their first year. They can go in this transfer portal and pluck certain guys and say, "Hey, we want you.
Pick up
We
some
want you."
experience, so they're not trying to build straight from scratch too.
Right, like Arizona State would have been a perfect example but the transfer portal happened after they became Division I. They would have been a perfect trendsetter on how to build a program and use the transfer portal to make sure they had a good program. Them or Penn State, either one.
All right, so back to, I think, Omaha is where we're at now. Back at Magnus Arena, back home.
Yes, a little bit of a reprieve for them after St. Cloud in North Dakota.
A little bit, but I mean, Omaha is one of those teams where they can steal games. I mean, they were able to do it last year. They split in Omaha last year. Denver did maintain home ice and took a sweep there. And Omaha was kind of like, yeah, they can steal wins, but they were a team that it was so hard to judge them last year. They came out to this strong start because they played pretty much a stacked home schedule. Really, it seemed like they weren't out of Omaha until like December. They were playing kind of some of the weaker teams in the country. They had Long Island, I think one of the Alaska schools who managed to stick it out and keep their team together. They have a tendency of being good. They did lose their goaltender. He signed a deal with the Vegas organization, I believe. They lost their leading goal scorer in Taylor Ward. It'll be a new team, but every team's going to be a new team. But the atmosphere and the feelings around Omaha is they can steal games when they have to, so you can't overlook them.
The frustrating part for Omaha is they're never consistent enough. So you can have the best team in the country one night, and then you can have the worst beer league team show up the next night. And they're the sixth seed, which they seem to finish every year, is about where they should be. They could be as high as three, but they always finish at about the sixth spot in the conference because they can't put wins together. They're not a team you can overlook. It's like I said, it's a little bit of a reprieve, but not really because they're good when they want to be.
Yeah.
They just you never know when that's gonna be.
No. Here's kind of, I would say, this series. The next series is more of a little bit of a reprieve, but Arizona State is kind of, they've trended upwards more often than not. This was a team that kind of dominated at the Division II or ACHA level before
Yeah,
making
the
the
club
jump
level.
to Division I hockey, and seeing what welcomed them there. They've struggled a little bit, but I think that's kind of to be expected making that jump. They've gotten better every year. Like I said, they were right at 500 last year, 17-17-1. They have one win and one tie against Denver. So in the 8 games they've played, Denver has won 6. Um, it's just a matter of them continuing to progress and what kind of players they've got. They're gaining experience. They're playing tough teams, and honestly, like, because of their proximity, it's a team that I think if the NCHC decided to expand, this might be a team to look at if they can continue to progress and develop and make a name for themselves in college hockey.
They're a team and we've talked about this before. They did it the right way. Their first year they went half Division III and club teams and then half Division I. They're Well, they're playing in an NHL arena
Yeah.
now.
I believe
We'll look
they're
at it that
hosting an NHL
way.
team in their arena, much like the Minnesota football team once hosted the Minnesota Vikings.
Well, that's fine. That's it. I mean, at least it was still roughly about the same size,
This
not
is
18,000 to 2,500.
this is true.
Uh, um,
I think the Coyotes might have a better chance at selling out,
it's the
playing
first time they've ever said that in their history.
playing on Arizona State's ice,
I think
and it's good
Arizona State.
publicity for Arizona State because the
It
Coyotes
is,
can't change the center ice logo.
but Arizona State, they just keep trucking away, and they're a team that every once in a while throughout the year you'll see them in the rankings. They're 22nd, 23rd, but they make their way in there. So they kind of hang around, and what they've done down there is it's actually pretty impressive. Now, Austin Matthews is helping that a little bit, being from Arizona himself, that they can be like, hey, we can. Arizona's not the worst place for hockey. Yeah, I know our NHL team sucks, but if you come here, you can play Division I. You can move up the ranks. Uh, so it's more of a reprieve than Omaha, but I still think they're a tough team. They're going to put up a solid fight. Is basically what I'm saying.
I'm gonna stick with history and say that this is gonna be a sweep for Denver, but I think they're gonna be close games. They're probably gonna be like 4-2, maybe 5-3 games. Um, but Arizona State and the Coyotes, they do have ties other than just being the fact that Arizona State said yes, you can use our ice this season. I believe one of the players at Arizona State is the son of Shane Doan, longtime captain of the Coyotes.
Oh,
So there,
Donor's kid.
so there's some ties there between the two teams aside from sharing ice, and it might be like but and I believe he was drafted by the Coyotes too.
He was
Um,
drafted by the Coyotes. I do know that because I think Doan actually made the pick because he's an executive now
yeah.
with the Coyotes.
So honestly, like, playing against that team, you're kind of more so if you're on Arizona State, if you're at Arizona State, but there's gonna be execs in the building. Chances are because their offices are close, or they're looking at guys that they've drafted to that from that team. So it's an opportunity to have eyes on you from the next level, even if you may think that opponent is below you, but also realize that those dudes are coming to play every single day because they want to be looked at too.
Well, and I do think it helps Denver that the series is at Magnus Arena, uh, but yeah, those guys, it's any college team that if you're playing in the same arena that an NHL team is, these the executives and the scouts, they don't have to go far. They have to go, maybe take the elevator down a floor and then they're watching that. So these kids they're playing for their futures at Arizona State. And yeah, you're in Denver, but Pepsi Center, well, Ball Arena now, I still call it the Pepsi Center. That's not very far away.
Yep.
Those guys are going to be there, but these kids are used to playing or are now going to be used to playing in front of NHL executives that maybe want to sign them to contracts once they're done.
And so here's this might be the series I'm looking forward to the most outside of anything that Western's playing. And that's Minnesota Duluth versus Denver. This one's in Duluth. Um, they play later at Magnus in the season, but I mean it was a split all 6 games last season, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Duluth was the team that was able to hand Denver their first loss on home ice, or their only loss on home ice last year. So as far as like looking at this year, this is a series that's gonna be a great series to watch. You know, and they got to play each other in 2 different tournaments and split even those games, and it came down to one play, I think, both times.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say I lean a little bit towards Denver, but even that's kind of hard to say. Like, it's really a coin flip in these games. It depends on who Minnesota Duluth goes with that goalie. Um, I mean, it should be
It should be
Stay
Stay
Skull,
Skull, but
but how
you never know.
that's kind of dependent on how he feels, making the jump back to a full time starting job, and if he earns the right to be the number one starter and plays well, and by all means, awesome. I think he actually might have been the goalie that stole the win in Denver, or he was at least with the team when they were in Denver and provided some moral
Mm-hmm.
support there, coming back the way he did. Uh, heavyweight tilt for sure. Um,
It These games, even last year, I went to the Saturday game and we got the crap kicked out of us on Friday, and we kicked the crap out of them on Saturday. You never know what you're going to get with these two teams because they make adjustments so well between Friday and Saturday. And yeah, UMD, that's kind of our MO. We're going to split. We're never really going to sweep unless it's a cakewalk of a team. Um, but between Denver and UMD, whoever loses that first game, you're winning the next one because you're going to adjust so well. And that will be a really fun one. I'm going to try and get to more games, and that's one that I would love to go up to Duluth for, especially because the whole student section should still be filled up, and it's not going to be Christmas break like it was last year.
yeah. But that's definitely a series that I'm looking forward to, aside from anything that Western's playing. And there's a few here and there that I really look forward to, and this is going to be one of them, based on the history of last season. And then we do have a newcomer to Division One hockey playing Denver. That is Lindenwood, and I think they did actually play. Yep, they played once last year. Denver won 9-1. Um, this is a team that kind of like Arizona State kind of dominated the lower tiers. They went 22-3 last year, playing their mostly club schedule still. Interesting matchup. I think it's a good time to schedule this game. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
take an easier series to kind of be a dick about it, really, going into the holidays, but one that still needs to be played, but
It,
isn't
it's
necessarily pushing the players too hard to overexert themselves and get hurt before a break.
it's going to be a St. Cloud St. Thomas first game of the year last year. That's the situation, and I do know Lindenwood dominated. I had class with a guy in college who transferred to my school after playing goalie at Lindenwood and winning the national championship for the club hockey in ACHA Division One. But they're just going to learn, and I hope the guys that are playing on that Lindenwood team know that it's a learning experience. It's a different level, uh, and I think these next few series for Denver, it's kind of a good break in their schedule where it's not so intensive, where they can get prepared for the second half of the schedule, basically. So, Lindenwood, best of luck to them, but you guys are screwed. Like
Yeah.
that's all I can say. And then Denver goes from Lindenwood, they go Christmas break, and then their first series out of the break is Alaska Fairbanks.
Who they're welcoming to Magnus Arena for the second year in a row. Um, but Alaska, the Nanucks were able to secure a tie last year at Magnus Arena. So it's a team that Denver has to be prepared for and keep their head up because who knows, Alaska could steal one.
Blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while.
See, someone said that phrase to me, and I believe that a blind squirrel might be more successful at finding nuts.
Heightened sense of smell because they don't have the sight.
So that's a phrase we should probably try to eliminate because it's dumb.
I love it, so I'm gonna keep using it. But yeah, Alaska Fairbanks, they did I think they did stop their program, but they had enough funding from the community that they brought it back. Uh, I think they did have one season without
Yeah,
hockey.
maybe. I know Anchorage definitely closed their program for at least a couple years, and they're coming back
Yeah,
now. Um,
but it's for Denver. It's another kind of they close it out with Lindenwood, easy series. Don't overexert yourself, and then they get back into it with Fairbanks, a little less easy, but still one where
it's a nice
you're
welcome
probably
back
going
to
to come
college
with us.
hockey
Yeah,
series.
yeah. Just get your legs back underneath you and go from there.
And during this little home stint that they're on, because they're playing home 3 weekends in a row, yes, there's a break in between. I'm aware of it, but they still host 3 straight series. They have Miami playing their second series against them. This time in Denver, we kind of mentioned, we mentioned these two teams earlier. Miami struggles pretty much anywhere.
They just struggle
So,
in general. They struggle.
I don't know that the place is gonna be the issue for Denver. Really, I think Denver has a stronger chance at based on their schedule and what they were able to do last year. I would say that if Miami steals one, it's going to be at home. It's not going to be here at Magnus. But then again, who knows? Maybe you get a little cocky if you're Denver and you're on a roll at this point. Miami could sneak up and steal a game for sure.
Then then after Miami, they start
They go.
getting into the thick of it. It's not as bad as some of the schools that we've talked about, but you come back and play Miami, probably feeling pretty good, and then you have to go to St. Cloud.
Yep.
And I wouldn't say it's St. Cloud. I wouldn't say it's a tough place to play because of the fans. I would say it's a tough place to play because I think it's a crappy arena.
Well,
Uh,
here,
that's
so here's the thing though. I think St. Cloud is now the only school left in the NCHC that plays on Olympics size ice. Slight
mm-hmm.
advantage there. because they'll be used to it. But at the same time, Denver builds these teams that are so good no matter where they're playing. I think giving them more space with the offense that they're able to put on the ice is damaging nonetheless. So like that kind of plays into it, and Denver plays it. The one thing that I think I said, and I said this I think last year too, it's so hard to say that you have home ice advantage when you're playing Denver. They train at high. There's a reason that the Olympic teams train in Colorado Springs and in Denver. They train at high altitude. These kids live at high altitude for the most part, and they play most of their games in high altitude. Coming down a little bit lower, closer to sea level, actually is a benefit to them in that regard. It's going to be a good matchup, a solid matchup. Again, we're looking at the goaltender here for St. Cloud. How well did he do in the first series? Can he expand on that or bounce back from that and play well at home too?
I think Denver, they have enough skill where it is an advantage, but because they can play that grinded out game, you look at what they did to Mankato in the national championship game. Mankato was a high flying,
You cut out there, Mike.
high scoring, but with Bobby Brink being the.
You cut out for a second. You're back now.
Am I good now?
Yeah, but we missed kind of the beginning of that.
I don't know what happened there.
Might have just been.
So, you look at what Denver did against Mankato in the national championship game. They grinded them out. Mankato was a high flying team. They couldn't score it. They scored one goal, and it was kind of a fluke goal.
Yep.
But now you have that Olympic size ice, and they had a guy like Bobby Brink and those talented guys. You give them more room, they're like, sweet.
Yeah.
We can go from the grinded out game to actually having space. Let's go. Like, we're gonna put up the points. But I just think St. Cloud is a tough place to play because it's not a high class facility. It just isn't. I enjoy it because I'm only an hour away. I can go watch UMD play. I can go watch good hockey. But God, does that arena suck? They need a new arena because it's just two sides. You have a little bit on the ends, but it's just two sides, and their student section is so small. Like, why does anybody want to come play here?
The history of it, the fact that it's related to Herb Brooks.
It's the Herb Brooks National Sports Center or whatever it's called. Then they go from St. Cloud, and then they come back home for a game. Really, if you look at, I'm just going to kind of jump to two series because their Colorado College series, they play a home and home both times that they play.
Yeah, the last one was just to finish out the year in that rivalry weekend.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually saved for the last series of the year. Both home and homes. It's maybe an hour of travel time between the two schools. I think I might actually have the distance. Yeah, campuses are only 65 miles apart. They play for the Gold Pan. They've played since the 1950s. Denver leads that series. But the one thing that separates these two teams, or it feels like separates these two teams more often than not, is just talent level. You're not really getting that same home ice advantage of being familiar with the altitude. Both schools are up there. Both play at high altitude consistently. Both can grind it out. Colorado team is a school that can surprise teams. Western got caught overlooking them a few years ago, and got booted.
North Dakota almost did.
Yep, North Dakota almost got booted. Both super close games. They're a surprise team. You can't overlook them, and they usually get up for this series.
The one thing that really sucks is back in the early 2010s, Colorado College was a really, really, really good team. And so the games with UMD were fun to watch because they were super competitive. And I hate seeing CC being this bad at hockey because I know how good they can be. They're just not good right now.
Does that even make sense? There's not even enough days for those scheduled. What? Hang on. Denver's schedule is weird. I have to look at things.
Well, all I know, I have it up, and
Okay, I guess
uh,
for some reason it's saying that their first series is a week apart. Is that right?
wait, which?
The first two games, it says they play at Colorado College on January 27th, and they play home January 27th, and then they play at Colorado College
Oh yeah,
Saturday, February
what in
4th.
the?
So they're
All
taking
right, who
not
was drinking when they did this?
8 games between the two for that series. Is that can't be right?
It
I mean,
seems like
maybe.
it.
I don't know.
But the one thing that I find odd about their schedule with Colorado College is Denver has both home games on Fridays, and then CC has the Saturday home games.
Yeah.
You would think that they would, you know, the first series Friday Denver, Saturday CC, the last series Friday CC, Saturday Denver.
You would think, but nope, apparently not.
Nope, they didn't. They didn't want to do that.
And for a series that has over 300 games played, you'd think they'd find a way to make it a little more even, but meh.
And then Denver, they get to their,
This
I
might
guess,
be
toughest part
this
of their
might be
schedule.
legit be the toughest part of anybody's schedule right here.
We say that like every week that we've done a schedule.
This is an absolute grinder, though. I think the only benefit is the fact that 2 out of these 3 weekends they're playing at home.
That's the only thing that you can hang your hat on for them.
But
Because
it's the team that you shared the Penrose Cup with, the team that you split all 6 games with. That you did get the last laugh and you eliminated them from the NCAA tournament. But it's a team that beat you on home last year, and then a team that you have to travel halfway across the country for.
yeah, North Dakota, UMD, Western Michigan.
That is
So
an absolute gauntlet.
And it's tough because we already talked about North Dakota. At least they're at home this time and they're not in Grand Forks. UMD, they're at home, but like we've said, they're the team that beat you at home last year. They were the only team.
And you're getting to that point of the season where Minnesota Duluth finds an extra gear and just starts running shop.
Yep, this is that time of year where it's like, okay, we had our fun. Now it's time to get down to business. And then a Western team that you haven't seen all year, so it's a completely different team than you're used to playing because they've played everybody twice. Well, with the exception of Colorado College,
Yeah.
they have played everybody twice except for Western, and they haven't seen you guys yet. So and it's in Lawson Arena. The Lunatics are probably going to be really fired up because they're the defending national champions. Because it's Denver, you haven't seen it. That's going to be a really fun series to watch.
Yeah, I mean, they split at home last year. They honestly could have probably split a couple more games, but for whatever reason, Western just really struggled in the second periods at Magnus. I think they were leading both games going into the first intermission, and after the second intermission, Denver was up big, and we just couldn't get back in those games. But we did split at home later in the season. It'll be interesting to see where Western's at. We don't have Brandon Bussey anymore. We're losing our most productive line, really, because of the seniors who are leaving.
Mm-hmm.
We'll kind of get more into that as we get closer to the season. We find out what rosters are. But there are some talented kids coming in. And we do have some goaltenders who have experience playing in some big-time games, too. So, as we heard from Coach Crew a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. And then, Denver, they just finished up with Colorado College, kind of the end of the year rivalry, which we've talked about this before. It can mean a lot depending on where teams sit. It can
I mean, that was
It
a
could mean
series.
nothing, but it could mean everything as far as seeding goes.
I mean, that last weekend last year was extremely important for, I think, no, for every team in the
Yeah,
conference.
every team.
It figured out that we can determine who was number one and number two, between Denver and North Dakota. Yes, they split the Penrose, but they both had to play for to earn that split of it, and who was gonna get. I think it ended up being a tiebreaker as to determine who was the actual number one seed and who was the number two seed. I think Western could have potentially fallen to anywhere from. They could have finished anywhere from 3 to 5, I believe, after a certain point in that weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Duluth and St. Cloud were literally playing for home ice advantage the next weekend against the exact same team.
That that was dumb. I mean, I loved it, but it was like, really, we know we're gonna play each other. It's just a matter of where. I was happy it was in St. Cloud because it was a little closer and cheaper hotel room for me.
Yeah, I think the only spot that might have been determined was the fact that Miami was going to be the 8th seed and Colorado College was the 7, but they didn't know who they were going to play because the top of the bracket had to be figured out. So they came down to the wire, and it took every game to determine those playoff seedings last year, and it could just as easily do it again this year.
I would not be surprised, and that's what makes this a lot of fun is because every single game matters.
Yeah, it is a fun conference to watch and be a part of, for sure. But that wraps up the schedule for these, or for Denver. We'll move
Does
along.
does little Ben have any other questions
Ben or
for
anybody
us?
else in the chat, any other questions?
That's his name, right? Little Ben?
I mean, sure. Maybe that 44 stands for 44 inches tall. Not.
Jesus.
Shut up, Mike. Uh, Next week we will have a guest. In fact, it is a returning guest. One of our top 4 favorite guests of all time. We've only had 4 guests. They're all my favorite guests, so I'm not hurting anybody's feelings.
So you think?
I mean, probably. But Trevor Gorsuch is coming back next episode, so we'll talk to him. We did talk about his college career last episode. I think we're going to try and break down his unusual pro career. I'll leave that message for you to explore in the comments there, Mike. But I think that'll wrap up this episode a little bit. We kind of got through it a little bit quicker considering most of the games at the end of the season were close together conference matchups. And, we're coming back from someone taking a long vacation. So,
yeah.
Kind of ease back into it.
One thing I am looking forward to, though, is I know Trevor has some more stories for us. So we will have to hear those next week.
Yeah, for sure.
When he comes back on.
If you are following along on Twitch and you want to follow my channel, we usually go live about 9 o'clock. If you happen to not catch it live and you want a place to view it, we usually put it up on the YouTubes the day after recording, so usually Wednesdays, unless there's some weird mistake, like someone doesn't know how to check to make sure the audio's going. That has never happened twice.
Never.
But if so inclined and you want to follow over there and sub to the page, that one is just search Goalhorns and Fight Songs on YouTube. You'll find it. Our Twitter handles are on the screen. Mike is at Morrow04. I am at _Bronco. The page, the show has a Twitter handle. It is Goalhorn Fight Song at GoalHornsandFightsong, or you can email the page at goalhornsandfightsongs@gmail.com. Do you have something to say about the Twitter handle like you do every episode, Michael?
No, I got nothing now.
Okay, good, because there's only so many characters you can have, and I like to put as many characters that would spell words.
I'm just proud that you could spell it.
I had it open, so I could just read it because my reading comprehension skills are top notch. I think that just about does it. There's only one thing left to say. Do you know what that is, Michael?
Go for it.
Pucks
My
on
favorite phrase in the world.
net. Pucks on net. Good things happen. Like goal horns and fight songs. Until the next episode, have a good one, everybody.